Welcome back to a new lesson of English. My name is Artemis, and today we begin with chapter 13, The Adventures of Gulliver. The Adventures of Gulliver is an extract from the book Gulliver's Travels, written by a well known English writer, Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift was an Anglo-Irish author who is widely regarded as the foremost prose satirist in the English language. Prose is written language in its ordinary form rather than in the form of poems. Satirist is a writer who uses humor to criticize people and things such as the social and political systems in English literature. He often published anonymously or under pseudonyms, including Isaac Bickerstaff, and is noted for his use of ironic invented personas. Anonymously means not revealing your name or identity. Pseudonym means false or fictitious name. You could say a pen name. So Isaac Bickerstaff was the pseudonym used by Jonathan Swift. Persona is the voice in which an author writes a story or poem, or a character assumed by an author in a written work. Invent is create or design something that has not existed before or that has never been made before. Be the originator of. Ironic means interesting, strange, or funny because of being very different from what you would usually expect, or showing that you really mean the opposite of what you are saying. Besides the celebrated novel Gulliver's Travels, he wrote shorter works such as A Tale of a Tub and A Modest Proposal. This lesson describes the voyages of Gulliver to various lands like Lilliput and Brobdingnag. Though the character of Gulliver and these strange sounding lands are imaginary, Gulliver's experiences and adventures are written so well that they seem real and true to life. Voyage is a long journey, especially by ship. Character is a person in a story. Imaginary is not real. Gulliver, the story tells us, worked as a surgeon on ships. As such, he made several voyages. In May 1699, he sailed on the ship the Antelope. On the return journey in November, a violent storm sank his ship and Gulliver swam to save his life. Late in the evening, he found himself marooned on a strange land. Weak and exhausted, he slept for about 9 hours. It was daylight when he awoke. Let us read what happened next in his own words. Marooned is left in a place from which you cannot escape. Strange is unusual, unexpected, difficult to understand. Storm is an extreme weather condition with a very strong wind, heavy rain, and often thunder and lightning. Exhausted is extremely tired. Gulliver meets the Lilliputians. I tried to get up from the ground, but I could not move. I was lying on my back. Then I found that my arms and feet were held down to the ground with strings. My hair, which was long, was held down in the same way. Thousands of strings had been passed across my body so that I could not move any part of me, but could only lie there on my back looking up at the sky. String is a piece of strong, thin rope made by twisting very thin threads together used for fastening and tying things. Lilliput is an island where the inhabitants, the Lilliputians, stand only about 6 inches tall. In a little time, I felt something alive moving on my foot. Then it came over my body and up to my face. Turning my eyes down as much as I could, I saw a man. He was not half a foot high. By his dress, he seemed to be a soldier. Then there came 40 more, following the first. I was so much surprised that I gave a great cry. Then they all ran back in great fear, and as I was told later, some of them were hurt in jumping down from my side onto the ground. So, dear children, after sleeping for 9 hours, when Gulliver woke up, he found himself ashore on a lonely place. He was in the land of the Lilliputians, who were barely 6 inches tall. They were afraid of his giant size and had tied him down to the ground with thousands of strings. Gulliver attempts to pull free. After pulling very hard, I got one arm up from the ground. I also raised my head. This gave me great pain, for many of the hairs were pulled out. I put out my hand to catch some of the little men, but they ran away before I could close my hand on them. Then I heard a noise and felt a pricking in my hand like that of 1,000 needles. I found that they were shooting arrows at me. I was afraid for my eyes. I put my hand over my face. After this, I thought that the wisest thing to do was to lie quiet till night. I thought that then, my hand being free, I could quickly set free the rest of my body. Soon a platform was raised and an important looking man gave a long speech. From his gestures, I guessed that he was trying to tell me that they would not harm me if I did as they told. I too replied with gestures that I would remain quiet. I also told them that I was hungry. Gesture is a movement of hands, arms, or head to express an idea or feeling. Gulliver made several attempts to free himself. He also told the soldiers that he was hungry. Gulliver eats a giant meal. At once 100 men climbed up onto my body and marched up to my mouth carrying food. The bread was as small as bullets. So I ate 2 or 3 loaves at a time, and cries of surprise rose from the Lilliputians that I should eat so quickly and so much. The Lilliputians were no longer afraid of me. They danced upon my body and ran to and fro. I could have caught at least 40 of them with my hands and thrown them down, but I remembered my promise to remain quiet. Indeed, I was surprised at their bravery, for I must have seemed the greatest giant in the world. Later, I was taken to the city where the king lived. A great cart was made by joining many carts. 900 men worked for 3 hours to put me onto the cart, which was drawn by 1,500 of the king's finest horses. The city was just half a mile away, but the journey took almost a full day. Bravery is courageous behavior or being able to confront frightening things. Cart is a vehicle with either 2 or 4 wheels pulled by a horse and used for carrying goods. So Gulliver was served a giant meal by the Lilliputians. Later he was taken on a special cart around the city. Gulliver's new home. The king came out to meet me. He came near and looked at me, but it was not thought safe for him to climb up on me. At the place where the cart stopped, there was an old church. It was the largest building in the whole country. For certain reasons, it had not been used as a church for many years. It had now been made ready for me to use as my house. The great door on the north was 4 feet high and 2 feet wide, so I could go into it by going down on my hand. One of my feet was set in a great ring on the end of many strong strings so that I could not get away but could only walk some distance outside my door. The country outside looked like a garden. After some days, the king and his people were convinced that I would not harm them. So after I agreed to keep certain orders of the king, I was allowed to move around. Dear children, We can see that an enormous old church had been made ready for Gulliver to use as his house. Gulliver could go into his house by going down on his hand. Gulliver was also allowed to move around the city after he agreed to keep certain orders of the king. Convinced is completely certain about something or certain of your beliefs. Gulliver visits the city and the queen. As soon as I was set free, I asked if I might see the city. The king was pleased to let me do this. Orders were given to all the people to remain in their houses. I then stepped over the wall and went very carefully along the two largest streets. All the windows were full of faces looking out at me, and large numbers of people were standing on the tops of the houses. The king's house was just at the place where two great streets met. There was a beautiful garden on all sides of it. Lying down in the garden, I put my eye to the windows. The rooms inside were very beautiful. In one room, I saw the queen and some of the young princes. They were greatly pleased by my visit. Dear children, when Gulliver was set free, he went around the city with the king's permission. There were so many Lilliputians looking at Gulliver through the windows. Gulliver even saw the king's splendid house and the wonderful rooms inside. The queen and some of the young princes were elated to see Gulliver. This would be all for today, dear children. See you soon in my next video.